Welcome to Modus Cafe. Join us for fun, lighthearted, and educational conversations around training, athletic longevity, and the human side of climbing. With your hosts, Mercedes Pollmeyer and Katja Dev.
What's the topic today, Mercedes?
It is how to essentially prepare yourself for your first session at the gym. So if you're on a training plan, maybe you got this training plan from the internet, maybe you got it from your coach, maybe you got it from us, and it's your first day at the gym. It can feel kind of overwhelming. And so we want to prepare you so that you're starting off on the right foot. And this will actually help your consistency as well. So we're going to give you some tips on how to get started on your first day of training.
Yeah, exactly. Because what we often see is that when people get this brand new training plan and they're really excited to get started, it can feel really overwhelming to see all these new exercises. People can feel really uncomfortable, not knowing whether or not they can actually do these exercises. Often people don't know how long it might take to get that training in a given day. And some people don't know what weight to start with, or maybe how to substitute exercises. So these are some of the things that we want to answer today. And I would love to add to what you said that I think these principles and tips that we're giving today are not just really useful for the very first day, but often for the first week, because often training plans, include multiple components. So that means on Monday, you're probably going to do a different exercise or a different set of exercises than you might do Wednesday or Friday. So really looking ahead, for that very first week on a training plan and like how to prepare for that. That's kind of what we want to talk about today so people can set themselves up for success.
And that would be actually your first day and first week of any new training program, because, if you're cycling through training, you should be kind of on a new program maybe every 6 to 12 weeks. And every time you start on a new program, there is probably a lot of new things to learn. So, exactly. Yeah. Should we start with kind of like the first point, which is preparing at home? So actually your journey starts at home. And depending on how the program is delivered, maybe it's a PDF, maybe it's an app, maybe it's a notebook. But just make sure that if there's videos that go with any of these exercises, I always like to get our clients to make sure that you watch all the videos first. Understand what it is that's being asked of you before you even get to the gym. Because if you're doing this at the gym, now you've just spent 20 minutes looking at a bunch of videos and you're not climbing. And so now you're eating away at your climb time. So yeah, start at home and just kind of figure out if you have any questions. You can always ask good old Google, or if you have a coach, just make sure that you clarify everything that needs to happen, because I know when I write training programs, I try to be as clear as possible, but I'm not always going to communicate it as well as I want to. People will always have questions, and don't ever feel like that you should understand everything that this training program is asking you to. It's never a bad thing to ask for clarifying questions or instructions, like, okay, when you say this, is this what you mean? So just make sure that you feel really good about the instructions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually don't know if you do this, but I bet you do this. But I actually spend a coaching call usually with my one-on-one clients, just talking about the new program and all these exercises and making sure everybody's on the same page. And so, as you said before, the principles we're talking about is not just for your very first time training. This is every time you start a new training plan that includes exercises that you just have never done before. And so you can be, a seasoned athlete, but as soon as you start new exercises, some of these principles will also apply to you.
Yeah.
And there's no bad questions. Definitely, ask your friends, ask Google. I know I've asked Mercedes really, at the time, to me, silly feeling questions just about sets versus reps. Because when coaches write their training plans, they have very specific ideas in mind, and it's not always easy for the athlete to understand. And especially if you're new to this, it's totally fine. There's terminology you need to learn. So yeah, take some extra time at home, make your favorite drink, sit down and watch all these videos and read all the instructions. Really make sure you're understanding what you're supposed to do as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Which leads me into my point, which follows that, is after you prepare at home, make sure you spend time preparing at the gym. Now, you can do this preparation at the gym actually before your training plan even starts. You can do this the week before. And the preparation at the gym the week before can look like you walking through the gym and looking for all the training equipment. This can take some time. It's surprising. Make sure you know where everything is. Make sure you know what everything is. If you don't know what a trap bar is or whatever new fancy exercise you want to do, make sure you know what it is. And one of the things that I always tell my athletes is it's okay to ask the staff members. That is their job to show you where this equipment is. And again, then it's also okay to ask your coach. If you don't have a certain piece of equipment, it's okay to ask that question, what can I substitute this with? So this can be really helpful, identifying that you might not have all the equipment, because not all coaches know exactly what your gym is equipped with. So that's another really important point. And even something actually very basic that I want to mention here, because I've actually gotten this question. I'm sure you've gotten this too. I've gotten this many times, is something as simple as, how do I attach weight to my body? Let's say you do any weighted hangs or weighted pull-ups or anything. And I think to us as coaches, it seems like, we do this all the time, but we actually have, we send out instructional videos to show our athletes how to attach weight to your harness, because not everybody knows how to do that. And that is totally fair. But those are some of the things that you can identify before you even go to the gym. The week before your program even starts, you can identify all these things and makes you more efficient during the week where you actually start. And then I also like to prepare the day of. At the beginning of my session, I like to look at what are all the circuits I'm doing, especially, if you're doing circuits, we do a lot of circuits here at Modus Athletica. It's a very efficient way of training. And then I just make sure that all the equipment is within the space that I need it at. So I don't have to run upstairs every 5 minutes to do one exercise upstairs. So I just make sure I have all these adjustments, all the equipment ready to go, to make sure I can save some time. And then when you get started, one of the questions I ask myself, people ask themselves, is what weight or difficulty level do you start with when you've never done the exercise before?
Mm-hmm.
And Mercedes is going to tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, this can get really tricky because some folks may feel like in order to get something out of the workout, that they have to use really heavy weight. And like, I understand the sentiment. It's like, okay, if I'm going to be here, I want to get something out of it. I want to feel the difficulty of this exercise or this session. And then the other part of it is also ego, like you do kind of need to check your ego, because if you go beyond what your body is actually capable of and you do that in your first session, oh no, like you could potentially hurt yourself. And that is the last thing any coach wants. And so if you're going in and you're like, I've never done these workouts before, or like I've had a couple clients who have had injuries from certain movements and they're like, Mercedes, like, I don't feel comfortable doing this movement. Can I do something else? And yes, like, let's scale it back. So, I always prefer that if you're very new to a movement, actually just do a body weight. Work on the movement first. And then once you understand the movement, then you can start adding weight. So for example, if you have a back squat in your program, bet you have never done a back squat before. Hopefully, actually, like, especially if you're working with a coach, they would slowly progress you up to a back squat. But if you've got this like from the internet, and you're like, cool, back squats, I've heard those are really great for your body. To scale it back, you would actually just start with maybe a goblet squat. And to scale that even further back, you could just do body weight squat to a box, because a lot of the time depth is a problem. Like, how far do you go in the squat? And we always see on the internet, oh, someone's going what we call ass to grass squatting. And most of us might not be able to reach that depth with weight, when we're holding weight. So be as safe as you can. Understand your own limits. Don't push yourself into ranges of motion you're not ready for. And really the key is just learn the movement first. And that's actually, you're going to get strong just by learning the movement, because the first, almost any new training program, the first like 6 to 8 weeks is what we call neural adaptations, where your brain is actually mapping the movement and your muscles aren't necessarily the muscle girth, or like the size of your muscle isn't necessarily changing. So this is all nervous system adaptation, and you can do that without weight to begin with. So learn the movement. Once you feel comfortable with that, add some weight and progressively add weight over time. And from what we know from like research is that try not to increase more than 5% weight each week. And that's not a lot. And again, like that ego is like, oh, I want to see how much I can put on the bar, or like how much, like, let's go up to the next kettlebell. You're going to be much better off slowly progressing the weight over time, because like, connective tissue strength is a big deal. And that's a lot of science that we could go into, but that is basically like the deepest layer of our tissues adapting to the movement. And we want that to be adapted over a very long period of time, not just in 6 weeks. So just work with what you've got and don't put yourself into positions that you're just not ready for. And I would say that goes for your climbing drills as well. You can always start with easier climbs to do certain drills with. You don't have to do an onside climb if it says do an onside climb. And another thing, you can always, like, let's say you're supposed to do 3 sets of 5 reps of goblet squat. You don't have to do 3 sets. You could just do 2 and call it good, so that you can get through your training session feeling really, really good.
Yeah, I love that. Essentially, to summarize what you said, in other words, is make sure you learn how to ride a bike before you want to go fast. And
That's right.
training is just like that. First, you really want to learn the movement and get going, be able to, balance on that bike and feel secure and comfortable before you start going faster. And once you feel comfortable going faster, you don't want to go from 30 to 60 miles in a day either. You're probably going to progress on that too. So it's pretty scary to go 60 miles an hour on a bike, but people do it. So yeah, just take your time progressing, and remember that even with less intensity initially, you're still teaching your body. You're still working on that strength aspect, that neural adaptation that Mercedes was talking about. Sorry, I had to laugh because earlier we had this conversation about neural versus neuronal, and I like to say neuronal because I come from a science background, and that's what we say. But I can adapt.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a mood. It's like you're in a mood. I'm neuronal. I'm feeling very neuronal today.
Well, I feel neuronal, especially when I go to the gym.
Yeah.
Okay. Point number 3 that I wanted to make, which you have kind of touched on a little bit, is plan for more time at the gym than it would normally take you. So bring a little bit of extra time if you can. If you don't have this extra time in order to make sure you're still putting in the quality, just reduce the quantity initially. Like Mercedes said, it's okay if, especially during the first week, if you're still learning all these movements, to do a little bit less in terms of your sets and reps. If it's, especially if it's a time issue, because focusing on doing the movements well. And sometimes what happens is when you do start really easy, and you want to progress a little bit, you spend a lot of time just doing that and practicing the movements, and that is important. So don't shortcut that, but you can just reduce the number of sets, for example, or bring a little bit of extra time. And I suggest an extra snack as well.
Ooh, that's good, Beta.
Yeah, to make it
Yeah.
through any
Yep.
gym session, but especially the first one, which the first ones can be longer gym sessions in general.
Yes.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot. We talked about preparing at home, preparing at the gym, how to choose the right weight being really starting really easy, progressively and slowly working up to bigger weights or more higher difficulty, depending on what exercise you do. If it's a climbing drill, as you said, that goes for climbing drills as well. And we also talked about planning for more time. That's really important so people don't feel stressed. And one other question that actually I have written down, Mercedes, I'm hoping you can answer is, can you give a few examples of what people can do to substitute? Now, ideally, what you want to do is you look at your training plan before you go to the gym, and then you go to the gym. This is the preparing at home, preparing at the gym, and you find, well, my gym doesn't have a trap bar, but I'm supposed to do these trap bar exercises. What can I do instead? How can I modify my training plan? So if you do that ahead of time, you can modify your training plan ahead of time with your coach or with Dr. Google, or your friend, whoever you want to train with. But let's say, Mercedes, people do have bench presses at the gym, but then they show up on the day of training. And this is actually probably good advice for any training day, but especially the first day when people tend to be a little bit more nervous and anxious to begin with. What do you do when the equipment is technically there at the gym, but it's just not available because everybody else wants the bench press at the same time you're bench pressing? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. And actually, I feel like this happens a lot. And the first thing is having a flexible mindset. Just because that piece of equipment is taken, it doesn't mean that your workout is now screwed. Like you can still train the muscle groups doing similar movements. And so with let's say a bench press, you're working on what we call horizontal pressing. And that movement, you could do a chest press with dumbbells instead if there's a bench available and you have the right amount of dumbbell weight. And if that's not available, you can always do push-ups. And if push-ups feel easy for the reps and sets that you're trying to do, you can always add a band or add a weight vest if those are available. So if a piece of equipment isn't available, just think about the movement pattern that you're working on and try to adapt it to that. So let's say trap bar deadlift. You could easily substitute that for a kettlebell deadlift. I wouldn't say that a Olympic bar deadlift is a good substitute if you've been assigned a trap bar deadlift. But you could always do the traditional Olympic bar deadlift. Yeah, I think those squat racks normally are the ones that we have to wait for, and you never know how long you have to wait for those squat racks. So start turning those wheels and come up with some backup plans for the movement.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Mercedes. I think this is about everything. I just wanted to share my seedling analogy that I want to leave people with. But is there anything else that you want to say before I finish off with my seedling analogy?
Yeah, you had already mentioned this, but I think it might be maybe the most important part of this whole conversation is it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And I would say that that is true for every single session that you do. because no matter what, if you put some intention into your training, the quantity doesn't really matter as much because your nerves, your brain, they're doing a lot of the work to help you get better when you put some intention into it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for emphasizing that. Yeah. And I guess now it's time for my seedling analogy. It really comes down to, being kind to yourself and having this vision for growth. So it's springtime here in Salt Lake City, and a lot of my friends, and I wish I was in the same boat, but a lot of my friends are starting their gardens. So when we, plan a garden or plant a garden, we start with a seedling, right? We put a seed into the soil. And just imagine putting the seed into the soil is like you acquiring your training plan and just getting started. That's your plan for what you want to do. And now, when you start showing up at the gym, especially this very first week, it's like you're this tiny seedling that's emerging out of the ground. So, yeah, you might look small. You might think you look small. You might not feel as strong. That's because you might not be there yet. But you are this seedling, which is this possibility for growth. So keep that in mind, because with each week that seedling is going to grow and you're going to grow into the plant that you want to be. So be patient with yourself and take your time, and that growth will come.
That is such a nice analogy.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great way to end this podcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you on the other side.
Bye.